Hi, this is Bernd Welter talking on behalf of PTV Group, and I'm going to show you some information about PTV's approaches towards territory planning. For this, I want to use a test client, this one over there, and first of all, I'd like to explain some of the major objects that are relevant for this use case. Let's start with the territories or the territory centers. What you can see here is a list of, for example, subsidiaries located somewhere in the country, 5 of them at the moment. That's one major object category, the so-called territories or territory centers. The second object category is the locations. This is, for example, a list of customers spread all over the country, and as you can see here, each customer has an individual ID, a location, and the same size. If we look at the data of these customers, you can see that there is one property that is called the activity, and that's something like for example, the revenue I can achieve with each one of these customers during the year, or the amount of time I want to spend over there, or the number of visits, for example. So the usage or the use case of territory planning is, frankly spoken, in short terms, is to attach each one of these customers to one of the territories. So usually what most customers do is they just identify the closest subsidiary for each one of the customers, and that looks like an assignment like this, or I can also display the areas. What we can see here is, for example, that there is the border between these two areas, the border between these two areas, and so on. This is, let's say, looks like a very good solution to attach each one of the customers to the closest subsidiary. But if we look at the numbers, we can see this here. Each one of these bars shows how much activity is attached to each one of the territory centers. And what we can see here is that the territory in blue has much less revenue, activity, whatever, than the red one, for example. So in terms of geographic compactness, this solution that we saw on the map looks quite good, but in terms of a balance between these subsidiaries, it's really a bad one. So I achieved this kind of assignment by using our planned territories approach without creating balanced territories. And that's what I'm going to do next. I'm now using create balanced territories. And then after a few seconds, we see the structure on the map. And if we look at the statistics in the diagrams, then we can see that there's still a difference between the lowest and the highest number of activities, but it's not as big as it used to be. And let me just reduce the tolerance maybe to 5%. And have a look at the diagrams. And then it's even closer. In numbers, we can see this here in the output territories, that the value is between, let's say, more or less 95 and 105%. At the moment, as each one of these customers has an activity of 1, it is equal to determine a balance between the activity and a balance between the number of assigned locations. So this is why we see the same values here in the activity column and also in the total locations column. Now I'm changing the input setting by, for example, loading my data once again. Well, let's have a look at the locations. Now we can see that some of these customers, they have a very, very big difference numbers of activities. Some have 25, some have 1. So we have, if we look at the map once again, let me just remove the areas and the assignments. So we can see small customers and big customers. And once again, I'm performing planned territories. You've seen that the pyramids just changed to different places. I will explain this in a few seconds. And if we look at the statistics of the result, then you can see that the gray territory has an absolute number of well, let's say 30 assigned customers, but is one of the leading activities. So the relation between these two KPIs is no longer they are no longer attached to each other. So they are now separated. Okay, that's the difference between each one has an activity of one compared to each one has an individual activity. So now what is the function plan territories? What did happen in the background? So my input for this function was the number of these 250 customers, and I specified I'd like to have a number of 5 territories in the output without specifying the coordinates of the territories in advance. So I just tell about the number of territories I'd like to have. Let me change this to a number of 3 territories. Call the function, go to the map, and then we see there are just 3 areas. And let me increase the tolerance and maybe go to 8 territories, plan territories, and then we get 8 of them. By the way, they can also be colored in the same color as their area. So plan territories determines the proper locations of the territory centers. This is why the pyramids appear somewhere in the map, and attaches the customers to these individual territories. The next function I'd like to talk about is the distribute locations. The big difference between distribute locations and plan territories is with distribute locations, I provide existing subsidiaries. So this is no longer greenfield planning. This is an existing structure of both object categories, the existing subsidiaries and existing customers. So I'm loading my existing territories. They are given by a label and X and Y coordinates. And then I perform distribute locations. Once again, we can see on the map, here is one center, here is the center. And what is happening now is that the server is not choosing where to put the territory centers because that's a given value. It chooses how to attach the customers to these territory centers. So once again, let's have a look at the statistics. Here we are. They are almost at the same level. Here it's balanced, still balanced. And what I will do next is I will provide a list of different, well, let's say amount of resources. For example, as I know, I will provide 5 different territory centers, and I will specify that they have individual numbers of trucks. For example, the first territory, which is in Prague, will have 5 trucks, 5 times of resources of the last 3 territory centers. Okay, forget about the 8 at the moment, that's not important. I will reload my territory centers in combination with the information how many resources are available at each one of these territory centers, and then I will distribute them. So the output now looks a bit different because the area that the territory center with the 5 resources is responsible for is much bigger than the other areas. So we can see the blue area, which is the second territory, that is that one, is still bigger than the other 3 ones. And if we have a look at the statistics, here we go, then we can see that the blue one, the Prague territory, is the big one with about 5 times of the activity of the smaller ones. And the red one is about double size of the smaller ones. So that's what we call the limits. So we can also take into consideration the number of resources that are available at these territory centers. The next effect I'd like to show is a mixture between plan territories and distribute locations. So remember, distribute locations, the number of territories is given by the territories that are provided as input parameters. So if the list contains 5, in the output we'll have 5 territories. With plan territories, I do not specify the territory centers as input parameters. I only specify the number I'd like to have. And now change territory is a mixture of both. I provide a list of input territories and a number as some kind of a goal I'd like to have in the output. So for this, I have to specify with my client that the territories I'm loading into memory are all candidates. Let me just remove the limits once again. Load the territory sensors again. And then I would like to have, let's say, only 4 territories in the output. So when I perform change territories now, the result will contain 4 of the given 5 input territories. So the server will decide which one is not necessary. Let's give it a try. Here we go. If we look at the map, we can see that one of the territories is no longer there. It's not required anymore. And you can use this use case for 2 different approaches. Approach number 1 is quite simple. You have 5 subsidiaries. Maybe you want to decrease resources and you want to decide which subsidiary is no longer needed. And the other approach is you have, let's say, 3 subsidiaries. You are looking at 2 potential new subsidiaries and you want the server to decide which one of these estates do you want to buy or hire. So it will perform the decision for you. And that's what we do with change territories. You can mark some of the given territories of the input territories as fixed. They will remain in the solution if they are not candidates. And the others will be, well, subject to change or potential for future subsidiaries. That's it. Okay, so much about this. That was about the use cases of distribute locations, plan territories, and change territories. And one more aspect I'd like to show you is the aspect of pre-grouping addresses. And for this, I will just remove this. I will load some completely different data. Now the setup of my data is somewhere in Italy. I'm loading 10 big cities. I perform distribute locations, which will create 10 areas. And what we see here is that some of the, here of the island of Sardinia, 4 sales guys should have to travel to this island because we do not consider a specific constraint that it's not meaningful to disrupt or to disconnect all these customers on that island and spread them over different subsidiaries. But that's something we could change. We can parameterize this in the input. Let me load my data once again with pre-grouped values. Here we go. If we look at the locations, then we can see that some of these locations have a factor or have a property that is called the location group, and they belong to the island of Sardinia, or they are pre-grouped, though it is not clear in advance which territory will be responsible for this. But the meaning of this parameter is just whatever you attach, every one of this group should remain in the same subsidiary in the output. So each one of these customers will be attached to the same subsidiary or sales rep. And it will be the same with those who are labeled with Sicilia. They will be attached to the same sales guy. They will not be disconnected. Now let's perform the transaction. Here we go, distribute locations. And then we see that one guy here in the south has to take care of both islands, and all the other subsidiaries will remain on the country or in the inner country of Italy. And we still take care of balancing all over these territories. So that's the pre-grouping mechanism. That's it. So much about territory planning. There are many more parameters available, and of course what you've just seen on the map is based on airline, but we can also do this on road network. Oops. Well, that was just a little movie from me. My name is Bernd Welter. Just final information about me. I'm working for PTV. We are responsible for about 700 FTEs worldwide, taking care of route optimization, and my goal is to achieve knowledge transfer towards customers. And if you have questions, just get in touch with one of these resources via email to me, to our support, or just check our online forum, which is a public community free of costs. We also have a developer blog. And finally, if you have the need for an offer, then just get in touch with your sales. That's it. Thank you very much.